All right, EJ, week 1 is in the books. We didn't learn everything about these teams, but we learned a little bit. We learned enough, I would say, to at least try to give an honest preview of what's lying ahead in week 2. We're recording this the day before TNF, by the way, so if you want our reaction / breakdown to everything that happens in Bills-Dolphins, of course, we do that on our TNF live stream every single week. So we're focusing more so on Sunday and Monday. Today, we picked out 5 very interesting games that we want to talk about today. Because if we tried to talk about all 15 of them, this would be like a 4-hour show. So again, we chose the best 5, not the best 5, the 5 that we wanted to talk about. Before we get into that, though, EJ, buddy, how you doing?
I'm good. Week 1 is always a little bit odd. Weird stuff happens. Trends that people think are trends appear and disappear. By the end of September, things will even out a little bit. But like you said, we learned some things. Definitely some red flags got raised, and we'll be tracking those issues to see if they continue or if they were just those little phantom week 1 jitters that happen a lot in the league now that there is a shorter preseason, less OTAs. Week 1 is kind of serving as week 3 of the preseason in a lot of ways. So we'll try and sort through all that trash for you and get down to some of the things that we think are, like you said, the most interesting among this weekend's games.
It's always kind of tough to figure out what's real and not real. And then, of course, our first team we're talking about is the Vikings, which we probably won't know what's real with them until it's time to go Christmas shopping because they're the weirdest team in the NFL. So hopefully we'll try to cut through the noise a little bit. Before we get into talking about that Vikings-Niners game, by the way, which is the first one up on the docket, I do want to thank Underdog for making this show possible, as well as every show this season. Obviously, they are our main partner, and they fund virtually all of this content that you're going to see this season, as well as in draft season and off season, all that kind of stuff. If you're not on Underdog already, the new customer offer this week is a Caleb Williams free pick. So, even though he didn't have a great week 1, I assume he's at least going to get a yard in week 2. I mean, I know it's Bears quarterback, but we think he's going to get at least a yard. So that's available for you all if you're a new Underdog customer. If you've never done Underdog Pick'ems or anything like that, it's super easy to do. And now your first entry is going to be made a little bit easier if the Bears can get 1 freaking yard. All the existing customers, by the way, that already play with us on Underdog every single week, they do have a CD Lamb free pick waiting for you in the lobby. So again, if you want to take advantage of that, you can find that at the link in the description or at the QR code on the screen. Do some pick'ems with us. You'll probably do a lot better than I did in week 1. I fell flat on my face. But, we got 16, 17, actually more than that. We have like 20 more chances to make it right. Ideally, week 2 will be better. All right, EJ, 49ers, Vikings. Last year's matchup between these two teams, the Vikings actually pulled out a semi-improbable win. Brian Flores blitzed the ever-living shit out of Brock Purdy. Believe it or not, 87.4% of the time. They either blitzed or threw a simulated pressure. So they only had like a 4-man rush, like a traditional 4-man rush, 12 to 13% of the time. So a wild-ass defensive game plan, which I guess we've come to expect from the Vikings. And I have to think they're going to do the same thing again this year. And the reason why I think so is because of this Christian McCaffrey Achilles tendonitis saga. It's unclear if he's going to play this week as of the time of recording, but I don't know, Achilles tendonitis sounds like more than just a 1-week thing. So I think we might be getting Jordan Mason part 2 this week. And that is relevant because Jordan Mason only had 5 pass protection snaps the entire game in week 1. And I know they weren't facing a super blitz heavy defense in the Jets, although maybe they should have because the Jets couldn't get pressure. But I am not sure yet how much the 49ers trust their non-Christian McCaffrey running backs in pass protection. And they're going to have to test them repeatedly. Like, they're going to have to leave them in protection repeatedly. You can't just have Kyle Juszczyk doing it the entire time. So I think there is potential for this to be like another Ivan Pace legacy game, because we know how much they love to blitz Ivan Pace, and just sending him after Jordan Mason over and over and over again. And I do actually think the Vikings, like their edge rush rotation is a lot deeper this year than it was last year. Like they can get pressure with 4 if they want to. I just don't think they want to. And I think their goal is probably going to be to heat up Brock Purdy similarly to what they did last year, isolate these running backs in protection, and just send the hounds. Like I really think that is the plan. And then hopefully Sam Darnold, doesn't have a Sam Darnold turnover that ruins the game. But I kind of feel like this particular matchup, even without, J.J. McCarthy on the field, you're on a backup quarterback already in this early in the year. This particular matchup just feels kind of sneaky. Not even sneaky. It feels almost like blatantly rough for the 49ers. Like, I don't know. I get bad vibes from this one.
I don't get bad vibes from this one, but I think I would get more even vibes from this one than a lot of people probably have going into it. I think if you sort of polled the NFL fandom right now and said, who do you think would win in week 2, Niners or Vikes, I think that would probably lean towards the Niners, and I think it's a little bit more even than that. The 49ers know Darnold really well. Look, he was one of their quarterbacks last year. Darnold was really sharp. I was channeling you as I was watching this game because I know that you love to drink the Darnold Kool-Aid, and, rightfully so after week 1. He was really sharp. He made a lot of good throws, and quite frankly, I think if you switch the quarterbacks in that matchup, the Giants might have won that game. Like, the Giants played decently outside of Daniel Jones, but if you give them the throws that Darnold gave the Vikings, I think that matchup could turn. Looked really lopsided at the end score, but Darnold played really well. So the question for Nick Sorensen, the new defensive coordinator for San Francisco, is can he use rotations and a lot of pressure, quite frankly, because there was a lot of short stuff for Darnold, and he was really good. In throws under 10 yards, he's 14 of 16. He had 92 yards and a TD. So he was sharp on the quick stuff. And Sorensen is going to have to basically make that more difficult for him. He's going to have to sit on those things. And the Niners have the horses to do it in the secondary, but can they against a guy they know pretty well? I think that's fascinating. And, San Francisco played really good defense, and they will play really good defense, but it's of a certain type, let's put it that way. And they allowed the least yards before contact per carry in the league. So the Vikings run game, not that a lot of run games coming into San Francisco have a lot of hope, but literally the San Francisco 49ers allowed negative 0.17 yards before contact, which means they hit everybody behind the line on average, which is nuts. So it's going to be in Darnold's hands. The 49ers know Darnold really well. He was in their stable of quarterbacks last year, and Sorensen's got a plan, or I imagine he's got a plan, to try and muddy up that short stuff and force him to make a bunch of those longer throws. And he made those last week, but hanging your hat on that and sort of making your living off those throws again against a secondary that is very good is a much lower percentage gambit than what the Vikes were able to do against the Giants.
I think one of the biggest developments that could potentially happen this season is if the throw that Darnold made to Justin Jefferson in week 1 becomes a thing, like becomes a normal thing, I should say. It was a far hash, like deep 7, like an absolute, not even a prayer ball, because it wasn't a prayer ball, but it's a tough ball to throw from the far hash, like 40 yards down the field.
It's not a ball that you see get thrown a lot, especially when the DB has
hard.
leverage. Yeah, most quarterbacks
really
are like,
hard.
My chances of hitting that are pretty low. And Darnold was like, F it, this one's going up. And he hit him in stride.
If that becomes a normal part of their game plan, or rather just if they put it on tape enough to show that they can do it, that will alter how defenses play them, right? You just need to hit 2 or 3 of those a week in order for defensive coordinators to adjust how they call against you, right? Like I would say how teams are going to play the Bengals going forward might be a lot different than how they would play the Vikings, because if you're just looking at how the Bengals pass game operated, with the majority of their passes being 5 yards or less, you're not really as scared of the Cincinnati deep ball as you were, 3 years ago, just because of injuries and stuff they're fighting through. And so again, they just have to put it on tape a little bit. And if Darnold can hit 2 of those this week, like, they have a real shot. Easier said than done against the Niners, because you got to survive long enough against Nick Bosa and really that whole defensive front. And they got some corners that I like a lot. They got rangy safeties. Like, not saying it's easy, but if they can do it, like, they're going to have to hit a couple of those. Just a really, really fascinating matchup. Do you have a pick? I'm not even going to give a spread, but do you have a pick?
I would lean Niners. I think Shanahan still probably has O'Connell's number, and Brock was good against the blitz. They didn't see it very much against the Jets, but he got the ball out extremely quickly. He knew where he was going. He looked very confident. Time to throw was nice and low in those situations. So he can handle that. And again, this is Purdy's first full offseason in the league, where he was with his guys the whole time. He's got a ton of experience now, and he, I think, can handle it. So I would give San Francisco the edge.
I came into this thinking that I had a pick, and then I realized that I don't feel as good about it as I thought. I'm saying the Niners because they're the better team, and if they play each other 10 times, the Niners will win more out of those 10. But this matchup is not great on paper, just based on the information that we have right now. I would not be shocked at all if the Vikings win this game, just because they attack certain things about the 49ers from a personal matchup perspective, and from a structural perspective, like in terms of how they call defense, how they call offense. The Vikings are just kind of a funky matchup for them that I don't feel super good about it. I know I said I'm not going to mention the spread. I will. I lied. Like, Vikings are like 6-point dogs here. I'm not giving them 6. Like, no. This feels like a field goal game to me. So even though I'm picking the 49ers to win it, Vikings +6, like, if I'm a betting man, which I don't live in California, so one day I will be a legal betting man, I would probably go Vikings +6 on that one. Second game now, speaking of super interesting matchups, Bucs-Lions. Feels like every time the Bucs and Lions play, we get a really, really just entertaining product on the field. Both of them coming off big wins, very different wins stylistically, but wins nonetheless. Wouldn't be surprised if both of these are playoff. Actually, we know the Lions are going to be a playoff team. I'll just say this. Wouldn't be surprised if the Bucs are also a playoff team. So this could potentially be a January preview game here. Your first thoughts initially before I get into mine.
Lions are coming off a dominant run performance. They closed out the Rams, as we all saw in overtime, in a forceful, kind of old school NFL way. We're just going to line up and run you over and see if you can stop it. And the Bucs run defense in week 1 against the Commanders was not great, but we need to talk about why. So Tampa Bay allowed the 4th highest EPA per rush, the second worst yards before contact per attempt, and they allowed 4 rushes that went for 10 yards or more. Against the running backs, they did fine. Against Jaden Daniels, they did not do fine. All 4 of those more than 10-yard rushes were Jaden Daniels. And so that's where the context matters for Tampa Bay, because when we think about the Bucs, certainly in years past, we think about them as a dominant run-stopping team. Vita Vea in the middle, clogging up the lanes. They do not allow a lot to what I'll call traditional run games. I think that's probably going to continue. And look, Jared Goff is not going to confuse anybody if he goes, as Jaden Daniels for Halloween. Everybody's going to be like, "You're Jared Goff. You can't do that." So when Jared Goff breaks the pocket, nobody's going to fear him the same way they should Daniels. But on the flip side, I think Detroit's offensive line is also better than the Commanders, and as are their running backs. So there's a little bit of give and take here, and there's a little bit of truth telling that's going to happen here in week 2. Are the Bucs still the regular roadblocks against the run that we've seen? Can they hold up? Or can Detroit impose its will against even the best run stopping teams? And we're going to have a little bit more beta on that after this week. So I think that's the the primary focus. I want to see if the Lions can just exert their will at will. And look, even if the Lions can't do that, even if the Bucs do stop their run game, it's not like Detroit's dead in the water. They have a lot of other weapons. They can pivot as well as any team in the league on offense. But that's where I'm going to look at first, because I think they kind of want to, for lack of a better term.
This game fascinates me personnel-wise, because if you look at the Bucs secondary against the Lions weapons, I know we spent a long time earlier this week talking about the Jameson Williams speed factor and how they can really attack you in every single conceivable way, right? They can pound you with Monty and Gibbs. They can go deep with Jameson Williams. They can do catch and run stuff with Jameson Williams. They can work the intermediate with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. So like there's no blade of grass this team can't attack. At the same time, if you're looking at this Bucs defense, their secondary is big, physical, versatile. You know, if you're looking at these safeties, like how comfortable am I throwing over the middle against Whitehead and Winfield? You know, two extremely hard-hitting safeties. You got nickels on nickels on nickels. Like they have like three of them on the bench that could start for a bunch of teams, but they got Tyke Smith out there, who's going to be matched up a lot on Amon-Ra St. Brown. You got these two humongous corners outside that both can run. It's just a really, really interesting personnel matchup in terms of Lions offense versus Tampa defense. If I had to pick like who's got the advantage there, I would probably lean Detroit slightly, but again, I don't feel great about it. Like it's a very talented Bucs team, even if they're not the deepest out there. Like their first 22 is pretty darn talented. And then on the other side, you know, we love Jared Goff on this podcast because when he gets on a heater and he's well protected, like there's very few people that are more accurate than him. In fact, I think when they played the Bucs last year, they couldn't run the ball at all. And you know, Jared had to throw it like 21 out of 24 plays to close that thing out. Like they literally couldn't run. So they're like, Jared, go win the game. And he did. He is now facing a quarterback in Baker Mayfield on the other side, who similarly, when Baker gets on a heater, there's like nothing you can do. There is absolutely nothing you can do. He showed that last week against the Commanders where like they dared to play man coverage 6 times the entire game and he threw 2 touchdowns. And then they called cover 3 in the red zone against empty. They did a 4x1 empty, which if you're going against cover 3, but it's 4x1, like that backside corner is going to be locked in man coverage anyway. So it's a quasi man look for one guy. That one guy was Mike Evans, and he threw a perfectly placed ball in the end zone for another touchdown. So like you just can't play man against Baker when he's in a groove, because it doesn't matter how good the coverage is. Like he's going to beat you with a perfectly placed football 30 yards down the field. The problem is Detroit likes to play a lot of man coverage, and they got a lot of young DBs going against a very veteran receiving core and a very hot quarterback. Like they play man coverage almost 40% of the time there in Detroit last week. Like, I don't know. All of this is adding up to be a very funky matchup, 2 games in a row, where I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't really believe the spread. Like I love the Lions. I think they're a great team. But if you're looking at the spread, Tampa's 7-point dogs. I don't think there is 7 points difference between these two teams. Not the way that Baker's playing, not the way that these receivers are playing, not with the upgraded offensive line, not with a very hard-hitting physical secondary. I don't know, man. A 3-point game, and fuck it. I'll take Tampa outright. I think I will.
They certainly could. I mean, there's not anything that makes me look at that and go, oh, you're wrong, because boy, when Baker got in the groove, it started about mid-second quarter in the game last week, and he just started doing, for lack of a better term, Baker things. Like spinning out of pressure, throwing off balance, you know, heaving dots, running when he needed to. He has the right answers, and you can do all the right things against him, and he still finds those little cracks for big plays. And it's a knack. You can call it whatever you want to. But when he's in that groove, and the way to get him out of that groove is with a ton of pressure. So Hutchinson and his line mates are going to have to do that. They're going to have to get their hands on Baker. And that's, again, easier said than done because he's very elusive. He understands. But there are those games where he kind of loses the eyes in the back of his head, doesn't feel backside pressure, takes a couple hard hits early. So it's a fascinating matchup. Bucs on the road. I don't know that I'll take him outright, but I'll take him against the spread for sure.
I also want to mention, by the way, just a fascinating subplot to this game. Carlton Davis revenge game.
Yep.
So absolutely. We might actually get a bunch of Carlton Davis versus Mike Evans snaps that are not in practice for once. So just kind of keep an eye on that matchup because that could go a long way to determining who wins this one. Again, I think it's going to be a really close game. Wouldn't shock me if either one of these teams won. Detroit's at home, which is why they're probably favored by 7. But I don't know, man. Tampa's good. Picked him to win the division for a reason. All right. Speaking of upsets, by the way, Bengals coming off a huge upset loss against the Patriots in week 1. They knocked me out of my survivor pool because I'm an idiot and took the week 1 Bengals when I knew better. Like, they never, ever come correct in week 1. So I paid the price for that. And things don't get any easier in week 2 because they're going to Kansas City against the reigning champs. Probably the best team in the league until proven otherwise. And they have a quarterback who, I want to choose my words carefully because I looked at the film. I didn't think it was that bad. I really didn't. There were some really nice throws he made down the field. There was a touchdown that got taken away, but it was a great throw. It was a far hash 7 in the red zone, perfect placement. He had a middle seam later in the game that was really nice down the field. There was a few really nice passes over 10 yards. The problem was there was only 6 of them the entire game. And he had 2 good ones, 2 a little off, and then 2 that were really off, right? So I'm not, if you're looking at like the water bottle controversy of like, oh, he can't pick up a water bottle. Like, I'm not all the way there yet on like, oh, his wrist is screwed or his hand is screwed. But it does look a little bit different. Like, I'm willing to admit, he doesn't look 100% to me. I don't think anybody can watch that game and think he looks 100%. It's not dire, but we are officially on Burrow watch, which is why this is the worst possible time that they could play KC. Because no Higgins, offensive line is already kind of getting beat up a little bit. Quarterback may or may not be fully functional. Like, this is horrible timing for them.
I think it's completely fair to say that Burrow is not 100% healthy. Now, that doesn't mean he is going in the tank or he's going back on IR or anything else, but he's not 100% healthy. If you look at him on the field, forget the water bottle, he's shaking that thing out. He's twisting it. He's trying to keep it loose, just like players that have all kinds of injuries. You see a player get hit in the ribs and they're stretching. Will Levis had a heating pad on his back in week 1 because he took a nasty shot in the side right near the top of the hip. Like, guys do this all the time. And Burrow was kind of constantly fiddling with that arm. Then you look at the passing chart, and I think that's a fine passing chart for a lot of players, but we're used to a much higher standard and level of precision, certainly on deep passes from Joe Burrow than that. So for Joe Burrow, it's not fine. It's just fine. And fine when you're playing the Kansas City Chiefs is not anywhere near good enough. And we've seen Burrow play through stuff before, and we knew he wasn't 100%. And sure enough, when he came back to much closer to full health, his stats went up. The ability for him to impose his will on an opposing defense went up. His EPA per pass was not great. Again, you talked about why. He took 3 sacks on only 6 pressures. That also is not great and not very Joe Burrow-like, and probably doesn't have a ton to do with his arm, but it's not awesome. He talked about the offensive line taking some hits. It's the second lowest amount of pressure in the league on week 1, and he still gave up 3. They took 3 sacks off of it. So that's not awesome. So what are you going to do if you're the Bengals and you have a clearly not 100% functioning battle station in Joe Burrow? Well, you're going to have to try and run the ball, and that's not great either. Let's be clear. This is not a good gambit to win the game. This is not a good choice to make, But I don't really think you've got another choice to make because you don't have all your weapons and you can't just say, hey, Joe, get in a fight, go toe-to-toe with Mahomes and throw it down the field because that's clearly not going to work. So the Chiefs last year, famously, we talked about this in the offseason podcast, didn't really care much about the run. They were going to let you run. Steve Spags is going to let you run if you want to. Now, they're not terrible against the run, but they clearly don't prioritize it. And why should they? They were not great against the run last year. They still won the Super Bowl. They are going to lock you down versus the pass. If you can get the run going, and that's an if, what you can do is take the air out of the ball. Keep it out of Mahomes' hands. Grind it out. Try not to make mistakes. Hope that Lou Anarumo's defense on the other side can force Mahomes into a couple because he does make them from time to time, and Lou has had his number in the past. Not always, but he is one of the few defensive coordinators in the league who's given him some trouble from time to time. Now, if all that sounds kind of like a house of popsicle sticks as an offensive and defensive game plan, it is. We're talking about really thin margins here. You do not have a lot of room for error, but I also don't think you have a lot of choice because what else are you going to do? It's not a great outlook to win the game, but it might be your best shot given where your team's at right now. And sometimes the NFL just isn't fair that way.
And that's what's rough about it, right? Is the NFL put this game early in the schedule because they're like, we need to make sure these teams are healthy when they play against each other. Except the Bengals are injured in the beginning of the season again, like they always are. I don't remember the last time a September Bengals team was actually healthy. They're always a team that gets healthier by like October. So it's just unfortunate because if they were fully operational with like 100% Burrow, I want to say he's like 80% right now, just kind of what he looks like to me. But if he was 100%, and, you know, T. Higgins didn't have a hamstring injury, and they had all four of their great, because I'd say they're a foursome at this point with Yoshevich and Jermaine Burton, you know, plus Gesicki, like he's a very capable receiving tight end. Like, yeah, like that's a game, 100%. But this just doesn't feel like an even fight to me this week. We'll have to see, you know, since he can kind of get her on their horse when everybody's back and healthy and turn it around. And ideally they'll be fully healthy in January because I think the Bengals are one of the few teams that could beat the Chiefs in January. Right now though, it feels less like an obstacle and more like a barrier. And I just don't know if they're going to, like, I haven't even looked at the spread for this game. I'd be willing to bet Casey's massively favored by this matchup standard, and yeah, it's 5 points. So KC over Cincy by 5. I would even take KC on that one to cover.
I think so in this particular case because it's not impossible, of course, on any given Sunday, but Lou Anarumo's defense is going to have to play out of their minds if Cincy has a chance in this one. They're going to have to force some turnovers. They're going to have to be excellent against the run. They were not last week. Doesn't mean they can't be. Everybody can make adjustments from week to week, but you're going up against a very good offensive line. Like, you have your work cut out for you clearly, and you're going to have to play one of your very best games of the season to give your team a chance and then hope that the offense can find a couple of holes and grind it out and sort of win the time of possession game, because KC doesn't force you to pass by passing themselves. They just do it by scoring points. Like, they score points when they have the ball and they go, sure, if you want to run and burn up a lot of clock, that's cool, but we're going to score 7 every time. You might score 7. You're probably only going to score 3. You might score 0 with our defense. And then we're going to go right back and we're going to score 7 again. And, you know, you do the math over 3 possessions and you're not running the ball anymore. Like, you just don't have time to.
One thing I also want to mention, I'd be remiss if I didn't. Bengals run defense is a problem. We said it in the preseason. We said it in the week 1 recap show. Like, I think they're going to be a really, really bad run defense this year, not because Lou doesn't know what he's doing. I just don't know if they have the horses on the interior defensive line. You know, they don't have DJ Reader anymore, who was a big reason why they were able to do what they did, you know, when this defense was at the peak of their powers. This is not a an offense in Kansas City that prides itself on running the ball a whole lot, even in the playoffs where, Pacheco had some really nice games during their Super Bowl run, they were still 65% pass, folks. Like a 35% run rate is about the most you're ever going to see from Andy Reid because he just doesn't like to do it. This might be one of those games where they bump it up closer to 40%. And they let Isaiah Pacheco run wild here because if it's just a soft middle and they can get 5 yards out of it over and over and over again, and then, just kind of keep stacking pressure on Burrow by taking time away and forcing him to do something that I'm not sure he's really capable of doing right now, which is taking shots and trying to win with explosives. We mentioned, since he's going to have to take the air out of the ball. Well, if Kansas City takes the air out of the ball, which should be a lot easier for them to do against a really not great Bengals run D, like this could get ugly really, really quick. So I would say Isaiah Pacheco game incoming on Underdog right now. By the way, he's at 63.5 rushing. If there was ever a time to
do they have a
over.
Carson Steele line?
You know what? They might. Hold on.
I was going to say, because if they just sort of keep those guys fresh and keep the hammers coming, that's going to be really difficult. And again,
yeah, they do for a half rush TD. So basically it's will he score or not?
Will he score late? Yeah, we'll see.
I wouldn't be surprised.
No, I don't think that's a bad flyer, but again, those two guys just sort of pounding away in the middle of that defense. Lose guys are going to have to step up. They can do it, but then of course you've got to commit probably extra resources to do it. You got to get your linebackers closer. Both of those linebackers are good in coverage. They're both good on run fit, but they're going to have to be there, which means then you've got the intermediate behind there with Kelsey, and you're sort of playing into Reed's hands if you like overcommit to stop the run against Kansas City. That's just inviting a kill shot. That's not pretty stuff.
All right, second to last game on the docket. But also the game that EJ and I have most looked forward to for the last 6 months. Texans Bears. This is Caleb versus Stroud, two of the most talented young quarterbacks in the NFL right now, although Caleb, again, didn't have a great week one. But also, a lot of rookie quarterbacks tend not to have a great week one. Once upon a time, CJ Stroud got the shit beat out of him by the Ravens in week one. So I'm not going to hold that against him too much. We know what he can do. And we obviously know what Stroud can do. Oddly enough, though, even though this is a highly anticipated quarterback versus quarterback matchup, I feel like the true matchup of the game is actually Texans run offense versus Bears run defense, because I've now seen enough of the CJ Stroud era to know that the Texans' main plan is to try to win the efficiency race first, right? They're going to run the ball and run the ball and run the ball and just beat the tar out of you with body blows. And then if they really need to get the Bugatti out of the garage, because it's like, okay, we got to settle this with a quarter mile, they'll have CJ Stroud and Nico Collins do something crazy, which they did against Indy, right? There was the 4th down he converted from his knees. There was that 3rd and 11 that ended the game. Like, if they need a superhero play 4 to 5 times, they'll get it. But I think this whole, Joe Mixon getting a billion carries this year, like that is their main plan week in and week out, is run, 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 run. And then when you get good and tired, they'll end it with Stroud and one of his 9 receivers he can throw to. So if the Bears want to win this game, they have to stop that first. They have to stop the run. And that is what's fascinating to me about this game, because they weren't particularly great at stopping the Titans' run game, but the Titans also have a very different run game than Houston. Houston called outside zone 28 times against Indy. And like their running backs weren't even getting touched for a lot of those runs. Like I think their average depth of tackle was like 5.4 yards down the field or something like that. So they beat the crap out of the Indy front 7 with outside zone literally dozens of times in one game. Meanwhile, the Bears only saw outside zone 3 times, and they were actually pretty darn good on the 3 times that Tennessee called it. I think they allowed like 3 yards on 3 carries, really good average depth of tackle, which was like 2 yards, something like that. So What really got the Bears was other run concepts like counter and power, and Pollard got an explosive. The way they match up against Houston's run game specifically, which is just that kind of slow, methodical Shanahan style machine. I'm really curious to see if they hold up better this week, just because they're going against a different style of run game that is less about popping Tony Pollard for an explosive and more so about accumulating yards and body blows over time. I really do think that is the matchup of the game, because if they can't stop Houston from doing that, they're just going to get run out of the building. But if they do stop Houston from doing that, and they repeatedly put CJ Stroud into 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9 situations, and they can try to get Montez Sweat to affect the game, now you got a real good matchup here. So again, fascinating game for a variety of reasons, and oddly enough, the two quarterbacks might be lower on the list than people think.
I think you're right about that part. And as far as the Bears' ability to play the run in the first half against Tennessee, they were a mess. They were an absolute haystack, and it was a lot of self-inflicted wounds, just not covering the proper gaps. The fits weren't good. Missed tackles, multiple missed tackles on single runs. They were abysmal against the run in the first half. They went into halftime. They came back out. They settled down. And they went, look, we were one of the top 5 run defenses in the league last year, guys. We got a lot of the same personnel, like play your assignment, kind of Bill Belichick, like do your job. And they were much better against the run in the second half. They still gave up some runs, but they didn't look completely inept, discombobulated. They were shell themselves in the first half. So they cleaned up a lot of their mistakes. And again, they still have a lot of personnel. They play with toughness against the run. I'm really looking forward to that. And then when they do have to take shots, I have every faith in Stroud, and I really like Nico, but Jalen Johnson still exists. Like, Jalen Johnson is one of the top 5 corners in this league. And if they put him on Nico, Nico's going to have a very long day. I'm not saying he's not going to have any catches, but he's probably not going to be the thing that breaks open the game. Stroud can spread the ball around, and he's going to have to. I think that's what the Bears would like to do. Stop the run, say, no, you're not going to beat us over the head with Mixon all game. Oh, you want to go to Nico. You're not going to Nico either. And now you're sort of on to option 3, which Stroud is fully capable of doing. But I think that's the Bears' like best laid plan on defense right now, is kind of take away A, take away B, and then we'll see who wins. On the flip side, Caleb had a rough game as his first game as a Bear and first game as a professional. Look, he's so amped up. The pressure is so unbelievable in Chicago, not just for him to be decent or good or functional or get guys out of the huddle the right way or anything else. He is viewed as the second coming, and that is a lot to put on a young guy. And he came out overamped. A bunch of the throws he missed, he was just too juiced up. He just put too much
I almost feel like they did him a disservice by having him do a home game in week 1. like that. Well, that was almost like, how could you not go into that environment where you have, tens of thousands of Bears fans looking at you like the savior that they've been waiting for since their grandfather was a child.
Yep.
And it's the first game you've ever played against Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat beating the crap out of your offensive line. Like, man, that was actually like a tough environment, even though it was a home game, just because of that pressure. Like, that's really hard.
There was always going to be that. And I'm actually somewhat glad that it went the way it did, that the Bears still won the game. Happy for that, that his teammates held him up and said, look, you don't have to win the game. You can play badly, and you did, and you know it. And I don't think that's talking out of school. Caleb would tell you the same thing. And the way he reacted to that, he was still pleased that the team won. Again, the air's out of the balloon. He didn't have a 400-yard, 5-touchdown performance, which just would have sent expectations over the moon. Everybody's now like, oh, what are we really going to get? And I think we'll have a much cleaner look at that in week 2. And in order to do that, I'm going to flip it over and say that the Bears' run game has to be better. Now, context matters. You talked about 2 of the best interior defenders in the league in Simmons and Sweat. And we're going to see this as it plays out. We talked about that week 1 factor fiction, right? As Tennessee plays out the rest of their schedule, you're going to see teams that they play against have very little success on inside run games. And that's going to go the rest of the season. Those guys are absolute monsters. As a result, Bears had the third highest outside run percentage in the league because they tried it a couple times and went, ooh. And on top of that, their interior offensive line trio was doo-doo in week 1. Coleman Shelton did not have a great game. Tevin got rolled a little bit. Nate played pretty good when he was in there. I saw someone on Twitter describe it, and I don't remember who, or I'd credit them as Nate had the big losses, right? The total losses, the complete fails. And when Ryan Bates, who actually outsnapped him, came in, he had more of the little losses, right? Where he's not as physically talented as Nate, but he didn't lose as quickly or badly, but he certainly didn't hold up and have the strength. So it's kind of like, what do you want to take? The high variance play where a guy loses badly and it's a negative play because of it, or just a guy that's, slightly below average, but more average overall. And those 3 guys, whoever they are, whatever rotation they settle on, they just have to play better because look, the Texans have a good run defense, but they don't have those 2 guys on the inside. So now we kind of get to see whether or not the Bears can run inside, and they're going to need to. You need to take pressure off your young quarterback. You need to have some running game. I don't really like the matchup to the outside running game for the Bears. Again, the Bears have personnel to do it, but so do the Texans. Texans have speed to cover the outside run. They do it very, very well. They're fundamentally sound there. So the Bears are going to have to pound it between the tackles a little bit, take the ball out of Caleb's hands a little bit. I'm not saying, only let him throw once a quarter. I'm saying you got to give a young quarterback a little bit of support. And if it becomes clear very quickly that the Bears can't run the ball, then the ball's going right back in Caleb's hands, and Waldron's going to have to use the short passing game to try and replicate the run game, and that means more chances for a very opportunistic and talented Texans defense. And again, you're on the road, you're in your second start, you didn't have a great first start, and now, you come out of the second half, maybe you're down 10 points, and you can't run the ball, and your coach goes, all right, guess what? You're going to rip it like 30 times this half. That's a lot to put on a young quarterback. It's not ideal. I'm not saying Caleb can't hold it up. I believe he can, but we haven't seen that yet. And boy, that's a rough spot to put a young quarterback in.
The thing that I found kind of funny was it was early in the game. I can't remember the exact time, but it was a sack he took from a Titans defensive tackle where he came up the middle, and you saw Caleb be like, okay, I'm in my element. I'm going to jab left. I'm going to do like this kind of like fake rollout, and then I'm going to go the other way.
Yeah.
And he did the turn, and he kind of expected the guy to, be in the ether, and he was still right there. And he's like, oh, fuck, this isn't Colorado.
It doesn't work like that.
I can't get away. I was like, yeah, dude, that's NFL speed.
And we saw that for all the rookie quarterbacks. We saw Bo Nix with a couple of those. We certainly saw Jaden Daniels with a couple of those. When rookies get to the league, they think, oh, no problem. I got this. I got the legs. I got the moves. Oh, no, I don't. That guy has as many moves as I do. And there's a learning curve there, and it happens for all rookies. And it's about how quickly they learn those lessons and how well they keep themselves out of harm's way. Because yes, everybody is bigger. Everybody is faster. And I think it was Jeff Schwartz said when he got to the league, his coach explained the games in a progression of speed. That OTAs was one speed, that camp was another speed. Third game of the preseason back in the day when all the starters played was another game. Another bump to week 1 that was even faster, and then bumps in each particular round of the playoffs where the intensity and the speed just continue to crank up. So it's not like one jump in speed between college and the pros. It's like you get to the pros and then there's 8 more jumps possibly in your rookie year of, okay, every time I go out there, it's a little bit faster. It's a little bit faster. It's a little bit faster. And I was talking to Aneem Dankwa, who we talked to at the Shrine Bowl, and I was asking him about OTAs. He said somebody blew by him on a rush, and he was like, holy crap, that guy's really fast. That's the pro speed bump. Somebody looked at him and said, that's like 40%, buddy.
For people that have never been on an NFL sideline, it's so unreal. Like, I would feel safer standing in the middle of the 5 freeway than I would on like an NFL sideline. Like, you're dodging missiles.
Yeah, we were on an NFL sideline last year, and it was during warmups because that's when, if you have a sideline pass as a non-media member or a non-team team affiliated person, you get to go down. So the guys are literally, they're not even in pads yet. They're out there in, headphones, loose, no sleeve sweatshirt, pair of sweatpants, and they're like warm up cleats, and they're catching passes and whatever. And like CeeDee Lamb is coming by us, catching, jogging fade routes down the boundary to the end zone, 25, 30 yards. Assistant coaches out there whipping it to him, third stringers out there whipping it to him. And the speed at which he's legging by us is faster than you've ever seen probably any receiver run in your life, unless you're in Division I athletics or you work in the NFL. And he is literally jogging. Like he's 50% max. And
they don't look like they're moving that fast because, again, it just looks like they're jogging. But when you're next to it, you're like, oh my God, this is not normal.
And, you turn around, you're talking to somebody, and you hear a 200-pound guy go down the boundary, even at 50%, it's do, and you're like, whoa, okay. That is half speed, folks. That's crazy stuff.
I remember I was standing 5 feet away. This was 2018. I was standing 5 feet away from Grady Jarrett when he was doing full speed, like get off warm-ups.
Get out.
Pre-game. Dude, I almost shit myself right then and there. I was like, if that hit me, I would turn into a fine pink mist. Like these guys are not normal, man.
The first time you're ever near a collision, I mean, really near a collision, like I was about 15 feet away on a Division I football field, and it's full speed during a game, and you get a 225, 30-pound linebacker comes up and hits a 210, 15-pound back, and they're both going full speed, and neither one of them lets up. They're both trying to run through the wall, and the other one is the wall. And I was about 15 feet away when that spilled out of bounds next to me. The sound, you can feel it in your chest. Like it is, you jump back. It's like when the gorilla jumps up and pounds the glass at the zoo. There's no way to just stand there and go, yeah, buddy, what you got? Like you're just like, whoa, okay, that is a whole different thing. I don't want to be involved with that. Like that does
Do you remember Pacheco?
Fun.
You remember Pacheco at the Shrine Bowl?
Yeah.
Like his pads, I swear to God, they were made of dynamite.
Yep.
like that's when we knew, like, oh, that's an NFL player, man.
Crack! And you're just like, what the? Oh, he put his head down again. Damn, that kid runs hard. Yeah.
So if you needed any more evidence that I'm not an NFL caliber athlete, just listen to the last 5 minutes of this show, because I would. Sorry, coach, can't come in today.
Well, it always cracks me up when people are like, oh, I could get 15 yards in an NFL football game as a running back. And I'm like, oh, no, you couldn't.
Dude,
you could take two carries and you'd break. I don't care how tough you are. Like,
buddy, make arrangements, man. Like you're not surviving long enough to get to 15 yards.
No.
If they let you get 15 yards, it's because they want you to build up enough speed so that they can fucking end your life when you get to 17. Like it's not, it's not for the faint of heart. So yeah, Caleb not being adjusted to NFL speed. I get it, because nobody is. All right. Last game. Speaking of NFL speed, I'm not sure the Cardinals have enough of it, because watching this defense, and to be fair, we didn't expect the world out of this defense this year. We're really more excited about their offense, or the potential of their offense, than their defense. This edge rush group is a problem. Like they just don't have the juice, and the Ojulari injury really set them back. Like I know we're high on, potentially getting contributions from Xavier Thomas at some point, their 5th round rookie, but like the rest of the rotation is just not good. They had a 3.5% pressure rate last week. And for context, the Giants were dead last in the NFL last season over the course of the entire season for pressure rate generated by their edge rushers. And even the Giants dead last were at like 13.5%. The Cowboys in week 1 were at about 33, 34%. So they were roughly 10 times better than the Cardinals' edge rush rotation. They cannot generate a pass rush off the edge. They just can't do it. It's a big reason why they called zero so much. Like they called a shit ton of cover zero in that game, even against Josh Allen, which is normally not a great idea because they couldn't generate any pressure. So this game, Cardinals-Rams, feels very much like stoppable force versus movable object when it comes to third-string offensive tackles against what would otherwise be third-string edge rushers on most other teams. Boy, this is not good for Arizona. And then when you factor in their offense didn't look particularly in sync either. I had high hopes for Arizona this year. It's very possible they still turn it around, but this week might be rough. Like I'm setting the stage for you folks. This is not a good matchup at all.
On the defensive side, that's why they went after Darius Robinson. Of course, he's hurt. He's not playing, so that doesn't help them. They invested a high round pick on what, exactly the issue they needed to fix, and they also lost somebody else, so now they're even farther in the hole. I am going to flip it to the other side because I was most interested on the offense. Again, I think we knew more of what we were getting in the defense. They ran 35 pass plays in week 1, and they got 146 yards out of it, 1 TD. That was 4.2 yards per pass, 7th worst in the league. They allowed 4 sacks, which was the 3rd worst, on 13 pressures, which was the 11th worst. So the offense, we like a lot of the pieces they have on offense, and we like Drew Petzing. We sung his praises. And as I went back and watched that game, a lot of this runs through Kyler, and that's the way that it runs in any NFL organization. If your quarterback is not playing well, if he's not seeing the field very well, and if he's not dealing it accurately and effectively, your offense can be as good as you want on paper, and on grass, it's not going to be great. Kyler looks like he's regressed to me. He missed some open looks. There were guys. MHJ was open a couple times. McBride was open a couple times. He didn't hit him. He bailed on some decent pockets. He held in some not great pockets, but he bailed on some decent pockets, which is not a great sign. He had the highest time to throw in the league, 3.19 seconds. He ended up with 5.2 yards per attempt, which was 7th worst in the league. When your quarterback is playing at that level, missing open looks and, not hitting guys when, again, Petzing schemed them up and they're there and open, you are not going to have a good offensive performance overall. Cardinals have made their living running the football with James Conner. Like, that has been their bedrock. When other things haven't been working, or they haven't had the horses, or Kyler's been hurt, they have gone to running the football. Conner took all the carriers in the opener. He averaged 3.1 yards per carry, which was 2nd to the last in the league. And your right tackle's going to miss time now. So your pass game, out of sync, like you said, not hopeless. Doesn't mean it's not going to do anything for the rest of the season, but it certainly didn't hit on, I'm not going to say all cylinders, not even most of the cylinders in week 1. Your running game, which is what you've relied on, was not overly effective. And if they can't get anything working on offense, I don't care how beat up the Rams are, because the Rams are coming into this one pretty injured. That might give some Cardinals watchers hope. Still, you can't generate a pass rush. Your offense that we hope to see really take flight, spring to life, the passing offense, was not great, and the rushing offense, which has been your fallback position, is already on fire. So where are you going to go? It's not looking good for the Cardinals this week against the Rams.
By the way, for those of you that want to capitalize on the Cardinals having literally zero pass rush on Underdog right now, Kupp is at 86.5 receiving for high or lower, and Matthew Stafford is at 260.5 passing. So do with that what you will. I know I personally will be taking advantage of that. And again, you still get that CeeDee Lamb free pick if you're an existing Underdog user, or if you're a brand new Underdog user, you get Caleb at half a yard. So those 3 by themselves is a half decent start for you. I want to bring up a point that Gannon made this week, because obviously they got a lot of questions about Marvin Harrison and the lack of targets, or not lack of targets, just lack of targets and lack of yards and lack of catches, lack of everything. And he's like, oh yeah, they cloud covered him a lot, which is basically him saying they were in cover 2 a lot with a cloud corner, or they were in quarter half with a cloud corner to Marvin's side. The implication is that there was nowhere for him to go, right? You have one under, you have one over, there's no way to get him the ball. ignoring the fact that every other elite receiver in the NFL gets cloud covered all the time, and they still find a way to get them the ball, but that's neither here nor there. I was curious about it, so I went and I looked at the tape. They called cover 2 9 times. It was generally in third and long situations. They called quarter, half, several other times. Again, it was either in second and long or third and long. So when they say, they cloud covered Marvin, yes and no, because they weren't specifically doing it to take away Marvin. It's just the Bills call cover 2 on third and long. Like, that's just what they do. And Marvin was in the slot, and they still called it. Like, he was running seam routes and curl routes that were completely ignored. They called a smash concept to the boundary, specifically to attack cover 2, and he was running the 7 on smash. They high-load the corner. It was there. Completely ignored it. So I understand Gannon's just saying it to protect his quarterback and protect his receiver from scrutiny, but like, we can look at the tape. Like, they were not specifically taking away Marvin Harrison Jr. The quarterback had a bad game. The offensive line had a bad game. Marvin himself, I don't even want to say he had a bad game. He was just, the utilization by Petzing I thought was questionable. It was just a bad day. It was a bad day at the office for the offense. And we hope that they'll kind of, get back on the horse this week or fairly soon, because this is a very talented unit, and we think the world of Petzing, and we do think that Kyler is a much better quarterback than what he showed in week 1. Like, we're not going to ignore what we saw. Like, we can't just, see one thing and say another. Like, they played like shit. And the edge rushers played like shit. Like, the team played like shit, other than special teams. Like, they were only in that game in the end because, the DJ Dallas kick return, which we addressed in the Monday show. But other than that, like, they were about to get run out of the building in the second half. They couldn't stop Josh Allen. They couldn't run the ball, couldn't throw the ball. Like, were it not for the third phase of the game, that would have been a much, much wider margin by the end of it. So, again, I still think highly of I still have high hopes for the Cardinals this year to turn it around. I think they're perfectly capable of it, but like, we're not going to ignore what we saw. Like, it was just a bad day for everybody.
No, it's the P word. It's potential, right? The potential for them to be a very good offense is there. They have pieces. Kyler has played at a higher level in the past. We're not saying we think he's past that or can't regain that, but he's not playing at that level right now. He didn't play at that level in week 1 at all. He made a lot of mistakes that lesser quarterbacks make, and he's going to have to correct them, just like all the other players that we talked about are going to have to correct them. And I'll tell you what, folks, defensive coordinators are not going to double Marvin Harrison Jr. until they can demonstrate that connection. Because, look, Marvin can run great routes and be open as he wants to be, but if Kyler's not hitting him, no defensive coordinator in the NFL is going to put 2 guys on him if they haven't demonstrated that they can hurt you when that happens. Once that happens, once he has the breakout game, once he has that 8-catch, 130-yard, 2-touchdown game that we know is coming, that we know he's capable of, like, nobody's going to double him, like, regularly. It'd be smart to double him in certain situations, but it's not going to be like the majority of snaps. Nobody's going to do that. They're going to load the box and say, hey, we know that you're going to try and revert to Connor and hopefully eventually Trey Benson. And if we can snuff the life out of you there, that's a much better place to put that extra defender than on a guy that has, 7 catches so far this year and hasn't really hurt anybody because the connection just isn't there yet.
By the way, for all 8 of you that didn't watch the Sunday night game before we move past the Rams, Matthew Stafford, still a very good quarterback. Stunner, I know, but he is. We are watching a Hall of Famer.
Yes.
And perhaps it took way too many years for a lot of people to realize that and to give him the credit he deserved, because it felt like people weren't accepting of the Matthew Stafford Hall of Fame resume until obviously he won a Super Bowl. But it's not like he just suddenly became good in LA. He's always been good. But the level of play that we've gotten from him since he got with Sean McVay, who I think has done a better job than any OC or any coach Stafford's ever had at maximizing what he is. Since he's gotten to LA, an already Hall of Fame caliber quarterback has cemented his Hall of Fame status because he is still doing things on the field at his age that very few quarterbacks have ever been able to do. It's the no-look stuff. It's how good he is under pressure. Like, and he's not super mobile, but it just, the way he is dialed in, both pre-snap and post-snap, he's extremely hard to rattle. He can still make every single throw and then some. Just, I don't know, man. Watching Matthew Stafford, like that is something special. That is, I think, one of the 15 greatest quarterbacks to ever play the position. That is a first ballot Hall of Famer to me. He's going to be in the Ring of Honor for not one, but two franchises, and he is still playing at a top 5 to 6 quarterback level in the NFL as long as he stays healthy. Like there is no limit on what the Rams can do because he is that good.
And he has every reason not to at this point. He has won a Super Bowl. He's made a ton of money. He's, made his point about how good he is as a player. That game on Sunday night, he got tweaked early. His ankle got folded underneath on that sack. Like he caught his toe going over.
So painful too.
It did not look great. He hopped up. He is the toughest SOB going. Like he always has been. He was in Detroit. He continues to be. Oh, my top receiver or one of my 2 great receivers goes out with a knee. Oh, my offensive line has shuffled 3 times in the first half to a completely different. Doesn't care. Just keeps directing people, keeps hitting those throws. The layered throws are so deadly, always have been. Again, arm strength to go anywhere, toughness. You can hit him as hard as you want, anywhere you want to. He's going to pop right back up and ding you for 25 yards. Like, he is just such a problem. And he has every reason to say, nah, I'm done. I've done enough. I'm gonna be soft. I'm not gonna work hard. Nope. Still there with the Breakfast Club is what they're calling it, where they're up early, watching film, pushing to get better. He's out there working with anybody that's on the field. It's like the ultimate guy down at the basketball courts, right? And you give him any team. He's like, I'll take all comers. I don't care. I'll take that guy, and that guy. Like, come on. We're going to whoop your ass. And then he does, right? He's just draining threes and playing tough defense. And you're like, isn't that guy like 50? Wasn't he the guy that had surgery last year?
It's like, oh yeah, but he played at Louisville.
Yeah. And he's just out there. He's like, I'm going to bury you anyways. That's Matthew Stafford, man. He's just a hooper.
And I think it's no wonder why CJ Stroud models his game after Stafford. Like, you can see so many of the things that Stroud does are the things that Stafford does. And that is a hell of a role model to have because he's one of the best to ever do it. He's still one of the best, even at his age. Like, and at this point, he's not slowing down. Like, how many more years are we going to get?
He's taken so much punishment. And I've said this on this show many times. I've said it on my other show. Like, he got massacred in Detroit. He played on a lot of not very good Detroit teams, and he got smashed in ways that are not easy to come back from. Back injuries, a lot of things that take a lot of guys down when you're talking about torque and rotational movement that quarterbacks need. Like, he's got a golden arm. He's a great baseball player. I mean, famously played with, guys that are in the major leagues. And, you think, guys, it's got to add up. Like that foot getting folded under on Sunday night, like that stuff doesn't go away. It just doesn't not hurt. Like, and he's taken so many hundreds and thousands of those. And I keep saying, I can't do it forever. Like, he's going to fall off the cliff, like physically. It sure doesn't look like it. We'll see in December, but it sure doesn't look like it.
All right. Well, looking forward to week 2. Again, there's a bunch of other games this week that we didn't get to talk about. Raiders, Ravens, I think is super intriguing for a lot of reasons. Chargers, Panthers. I mainly just want to keep watching Joe Alt play football, so I'll probably keep watching that one. Colts, Packers is one that a lot of people are really looking forward to. Obviously lost a little bit of its luster because of the Jordan Love injury, but just seeing what Anthony Richardson's capable of on a football field, like that in itself is worth the price of admission. Jets, Titans, Seahawks, Patriots, even Giants, Commanders, just to see what Jaden Daniels has got. Like there's a bunch of intriguing games on. I'm trying to be charitable here. There's a bunch of intriguing games on this weekend, but those were the 5 that we wanted to talk about. One more thing before we get out of here. Also want to thank Homage, our clothing partner, for not just making hoodies like this one. I'm wearing a Texans hoodie from Homage because they have an NFL license, but they also have the bootleg license too. So you can get bootleg merch from Homage. Literally anything you get from there, whether it's NFL related, college football related, bootleg related, TV and movie related, we get a cut of anything. So just use our link, browse the catalog, see if you like anything, because it's a good way to indirectly support the show.
And this week, for NFL launch, we're running a giveaway contest. We're going to give away this New Era Color Splash hat, which of course is a Bears one, and a Chargers t-shirt from their historic NFL line. So go check that out on Twitter right now.
Thank you once more to our Patreon executive producers over on Patreon that have been with us since the beginning. Andrew, Connor, Icon, Liam, and Mike. Thank you all once again for making what we do possible. All right, EJ, we're going to get out of here. We'll see you guys again on Monday for a week 2 recap where we're going to go over everything that we got wrong, which is probably most of it because it's week 2 in the NFL and we don't know what's going on yet. But either way, football's back. We're excited. And until Monday. See you then.